lives, and I feel like we always talk about them, and it's the Cleveland Browns. We always talk about how their defense has been their strength, and it was once again last year. And they had a couple of nice pieces on offense do well last year. Some young pieces. We saw Harold Fannin kind of break out, young tight end, and Quinshon Junkins as well. But and of course, we saw a little bit of Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders last year too, and those two will have an opportunity to maybe compete for the starting job more so. I think Shador Sanders, the ball is in his court, and then you got Deshaun Watson in the mix. But the Browns, they went out, with their first selection, they take a tackle, and then they also draft 2 wide receivers as well to add to that room. And we kind of talked about the different skill sets that both receivers possess. Concepcion is kind of more of that, shifty, crafty kind of guy, and then you got Denzel Boston, who's kind of the bigger receiver, 50-50 ball guy. I think the Browns are kind of missing on that offense. You still got Jerry Jeudy there. They gave him a lot of money and a couple of other receivers as well, but they did add some more depth and kind of, ramped up their receiving core there. And again, you're going to have, the other weapons that I just talked about, from last year with Quinshon Junkins. Obviously he got hurt late in the season, but you're going to see him back, and you add Fan into the mix too. Again, it's going to come down to the quarterback play, right? Shador Sanders stepping in again wasn't great, but in his limited action, you want to maybe see a little bit more what he has to offer. Give him a little bit more of a runway to see what you actually have in him. And, depending on how the competition goes, if it is Shador Sanders to start the year and, he doesn't perform well and, they end up going with Deshaun Watson and he steps in, then that could be an option as well. But I think that's what it's going to come down to. The Browns did also take a quarterback as well later in the draft. Adama, you could touch upon that more if you want, and how that impacts the quarterback room. But look, I mean, again, comes down to the quarterback play. If the Browns quarterback play is good with the defense that they have and the weapons they added on offense, I mean, they could be a playoff team. I mean, they made a playoffs a couple years ago with Joe Flacco. So, I do think that they have an opportunity to do that. And, that's kind of my thoughts. But yeah, the Browns are a team that we both really like. But Dami, you can go more into it and give your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely love what the Browns are building. And I talked about coming into this draft how I like what the Browns are building. And for the biggest thing for the Browns now, I feel like you're stacking really good draft classes upon each other, which I feel like we haven't necessarily discussed. Because when you look at the Browns last year, they get Swearinger, who was the defensive rookie of the year. They get him late, really good pick. You talk about them trading back from the Travis Hunter thing. Getting Mason Graham, who ended up being a really good player as well, a run stopper in your interior D-line. You get Harold Fannin Jr., that wasn't a first-round pick, that became a really good pass catcher, arguably in the back half of the year, your best pass catcher. And you got Quinshon Junkins in that draft as well, who we believe is an all-purpose back, who we watched his college career. And again, he's coming off of a massive injury. It's going to be interesting to see how he comes back from that. But we believe they also got a really good running back as well. So you got 4 really good positions coming out of that draft. Now you look at this draft, and we feel like they also did really well again. We wanted them to go offense in this draft, especially early. We felt like that defense was elite. We felt like if you're able to put up 20-plus points with that offense, this team has a chance to make the playoffs. And when you look at how they did in their draft, they traded back with the Chiefs, who we discussed. We felt like the Chiefs did not need to trade up. They trade back. I felt like they were going tackle anyway. They got their pick of the litter at tackle at 9 while picking up extra capital. They go Spencer Fanu. Now, it was a discussion, especially in our lives, Spencer Fanu or Francis Manoa. Kind of feel like Andrew Barry, Francis Manoa did have some concerns. We were talking about injury concerns. Spencer Fanu came in pretty clean. That was the ideology there that we felt like why they went Fanu over Manoa. But we also talked about in previous draft podcasts how there wasn't this big gap between Francis Manoa and Spencer Fanu. It was more just like what the mocks were coming out as, but we felt like they were pretty close, so I didn't mind that. I discussed time and time again, I thought my 4th receiver in this draft was Denzel Boston. A lot of people's were Casey Concepcion. Oddly enough, this team found ways to get both of them. I think, again, very much how you touched on. You look at Casey Concepcion, a field stretcher, and they got it they could use in their return game as well to help that area. But they also get Denzel Boston, who they could leave on the outside as a 6'4" physical type receiver and red zone threat. So again, I don't necessarily look at it as doubling up on the same position. I think you get two very different type of players that diversify that room and could round out this offense pretty well. Then you look on the back end of the draft. I like the Justin Jefferson pick out of Alabama. I thought he was one of the best players on their defense coming out of a really good program for the last couple of years. I was surprised how low he went. A guy that was able to play linebacker and on the edge. I like that as kind of like, I don't know, a draft pick with upside. They take the tackle Austin Barber out of Florida. I think, again, they're trying to revamp this O-line. I don't know necessarily if Austin Barber is going to come in year one and be a starter for them. I think Spencer Fannon is definitely going to be a year one starter for them. But, again, helping out their offensive line. They took Parker Beresfield as well out of Alabama. They took these players, him and Jefferson, pretty close together. Again, you're taking a player out of a premier program. Also, a center position that we discussed in this draft. I feel like the center position wasn't necessarily there, especially in the initial couple of rounds. So the fact that they came away with a center, I like it. And then you also, what I actually forgot about, they took Emmanuel McNeil-Warren at 58. A lot of people expected this guy to be a first-round pick. I felt like that was great value for them. We touched upon that they didn't necessarily need defense, but I thought that value at that pick was one of the best picks in the draft, quite honestly. When you look at Emmanuel McNeil-Warren out of Toledo, and we discussed it with Dylan Tiedemann as well, we felt like with Caleb Downs being this generational safety, kind of pushed these other safeties down the board. Safeties that could have either been the first safety taken or went in the first round. I thought Emmanuel McNeil-Warren was a great pick for them. And then you look at how they lost like Greg Newsome not that long ago, getting another secondary player in there that I believe that was a valuable pick. And then also you wanted me to touch on Taylor Green. I like the Taylor Green pick. I feel like they were in the right position to take a quarterback with upside because I feel like they don't owe anybody right now in that quarterback room any explanation of anything that they do. Because when you look at Deshaun Watson, they paid him all the money they could have. He hasn't panned out on his end of that deal. When you look at Shedeur Sanders, everybody wants to talk about the hype on Shedeur Sanders. The fact of the matter is he was a late pick. I don't expect Taylor Green to really get in the mix this year. And when you look at Taylor Green, he was inconsistent accuracy-wise. Arkansas was just a horrible program, but they did put up a lot of points. Taylor Green kind of goes into the Joe Milton family. When you look at just like physical capabilities, this guy has it all. When we look at the combine numbers, he had historic combine numbers for a quarterback. You're looking at a guy that could run 4.3, a guy that's imposing with his size, could throw it out of the gym. So if you could get Taylor Green to be a little more accurate, I feel like, again, this new Brown staff could look at Taylor Green a year from now, a year and a half from now, and say, hey, we could really work with this guy in a running style offense. Like I said, I thought that was a pretty good pick upside-wise because, again, we all expect the Browns to possibly be taking a quarterback next year. We don't know how anything is going to go. And I'm quite honestly fine either way they go at quarterback. I don't necessarily like the quarterbacks, either of them. But what they brought to this offense, I'll be fine with them going Shedeur because, again, you look at Shedeur like maybe possibly he could be the quarterback in the future. But then I'd also be fine with them going Deshaun Watson as well because with what they brought on offense, you may need a veteran that really knows how to run an offense and could give them some type of floor. So I wouldn't mind either way. But I thought Taylor Green, again, take a shot on somebody that had extreme athleticism, extreme upside. And I feel like Taylor Green, maybe if it was 4 or 5 years ago, when people would take Josh Allen and people would take Anthony Richardson in the first round, bake it on these inaccurate quarterbacks with these huge upsides, he would have went probably a lot earlier 4 or 5 years ago. Unfortunately, I think Anthony Richardson ruined that for him. But yeah, rounding it out, a little bit of a tangent, but I do really love this Browns draft.
Yeah, and again, I mean, we keep emphasizing it. It's really just going to come down to the quarterback play. And, they play in a division where you got Joe Burrow, you got Lamar Jackson, so you are going to, you're going to need a quarterback that's going to match with those guys. I mean, we're still kind of waiting on the Steelers. There was some Aaron Rodgers news today. Something that I'd have to look into it again, but something the Steelers restructured something that's rarely done in the NFL. I have to look into it, but yeah, still waiting on a decision.